We believe that knowledge must be shared and connected. This is why we created Uniminds, the biggest Slovenian online festival created to connect academia and industry. Here, you can find partners and ideas for your challenges and see how the industry and academia can join forces to build a smarter, healthier, and sustainable future. The first editions of the Uniminds showed us the values we need to follow in order to be successful.
Focus is important, especially for a small country like Slovenia is, and to have this shared vision where we want to play and where we want to be really the best.
Failure is not necessarily a sign of weakness. It's an opportunity to learn, to go on, and then try again and be successful.
Openness really helps, and people who are more open, they sort of succeed.
It is essential if we as professors want our research to have impact, if we want to work on relevant projects.
So do not miss the third edition of Uniminds. The festival will take place online from the 8th to the 10th of November, featuring an interdisciplinary program with best innovation practices of Slovenian EIT hubs, insight into world innovation trends, and Slovenian frontrunners. For additional information and past events, visit the festival website. We look forward to innovate together.
Dear all, welcome to the Urban Mobility Panel organized by the University of Maribor. My name is Dorothea Novak. I'm currently working at the Technology Transfer Office at the University of Maribor, and today I will be leading the panel, joined by 5 experts on the subject. Let me first introduce and welcome our guest, Associate Professor Dr. Tina Cvahte-Oysteršek from the Faculty of Logistics at the University of Maribor. Her research focuses on transportation logistics, traffic safety, and supply chain management. Our second guest, Professor Dr. Katrašnik, comes from the University of Maribor, of Ljubljana, the Faculty of Mechanical Engineering. He is head of the Laboratory for Internal Combustion Engines and Electromobility at the aforementioned faculty. Next, I am inviting a representative from the Marprom company, Mr. Tomislav Trbušić. Marprom is a public enterprise for urban passenger transport, which carries out urban transport on altogether 21 bus routes in the municipality of Maribor. Lastly, I am inviting Mr. Miha Valentinčić from Avantcar, an established international provider of mobility and lead provider of electric mobility. Their key business lines are short-term rentals, 100% electric car sharing system Avant2Go, long-term business rentals, fleet management, and vehicle rentals with drivers. Okay, so now that we are all present, we can begin. As stated before, this panel will focus on urban mobility, its challenges, latest trends, good practice examples, and possible predictions for the future. Why is the topic of urban mobility one of the hot topics of today? Over 70% of European citizens live in cities which generate 1/23 of all transport greenhouse gas emissions. Europe works with cities and regions to develop a sustainable urban mobility policy, including efficient public transport systems and good connectivity throughout their home country. It also strives to improve the quality of life in cities by promoting active mobility solutions, such as walking and cycling, through their new European Urban Mobility Framework. Policies, legislations, and regulations can make an impact by incentivizing mass transit options, creating new alternatives, and/or regulating the use of cars. So for the first question, I would like to ask each one of you, in your opinion, how has European legislation with their policy documents changed urban mobility in practice? Which incentives does the European Commission use in order to cope with its rising demand for urban mobility and ensure that legislators and city planners develop strategies to enhance sustainable integrated urban transportation systems? So maybe I would ask Dr. Zwachtij Oosterschek to start us off with some of her insight.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I think that we can all agree that the European Union plays a major role in developing urban mobility towards an inclusive, sustainable system, which I think that we as citizens oftentimes don't even see or feel the effect of all of the European Union legislation and policy. With the funding that they provide, like opportunities such as cohesion funds, specific horizon funding calls, many projects that I think otherwise wouldn't even be in place are funded by the European Union. And this isn't only infrastructural projects or public transport funding or stuff like that, but projects that enable really breakthrough technologies or pilot implementations of new mobility concepts and basically everything that I think will shape the future of mobility. Besides directly funding projects, the European Union, I think, brings a lot of new ideas into the sphere of urban mobility planning in our area. So, like, for example, they have a set of sustainable urban mobility indicators that every urban area in Europe can use to assess their mobility situation and needs, to give them an idea as to what needs to be improved, where they're good, where they need some improvements. So basically a benchmarking tool for urban areas to compare themselves and to find some best practices. And I think that for Slovenia, with a lot of the specifics that we have, like smaller cities, smaller settlements, one of the things that I, as maybe an academic, see in practice is the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plans initiative. So you've probably heard of this. It's an initiative where the European Union and our relevant ministries sort of focused on doing these sustainable urban mobility plans in municipalities to maybe encourage the shift. Because if you think about large cities, everybody knows that transport there is problematic. But to maybe shift that way of thinking even into smaller municipalities, such as, I don't know, Celje or Šmarje pri Jelšah, or maybe urban settlements that are really small, so that we got an overarching idea that urban mobility really is important regardless of the size of the city.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Professor Katrašnik, any follow-up, any thoughts on my question and what Professor Oosterschek said?
Yeah, thank you. Certainly, I will try to, let's say, extend this. So where do I see the challenges? I think sustainable mobility is really the right term. And sustainable mobility really covers a lot. And this is first part of your question. So policy and legislation. And current Green Deal and other associate documents go far beyond reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. This is certainly a big challenge, but it's not everything. So Green Deal talks also about toxic-free environment, which is extremely important. Green Deal talks about sustainable energy, about circular economy, and it's not just about a vehicle that does not emit greenhouse gases. It's about not emitting toxic emissions. It's about producing these let's say, vehicles with as small footprint as possible from abundant material, possibility of recycle them. And therefore, yes, as was already mentioned before, therefore we need a whole, let's say, chain of very complementary funding instruments, and they're in place. And so if you ask me now how much it changed in practice, I would say that changing in practice, it's something that we are now really envisaging to start efficiently. So it's not that there was no progress till now, but until now, we spent a lot of effort in raising awareness, in finding proper directions, and in developing basic building blocks. And I think now really the evolution will start. So, but the evolution will not only be to replace car A with internal combustion engine with car B with electric propulsion. This is by far not enough. This is zero emission mobility at the car, but not sustainable mobility. So for sustainable mobility, we will really have to rethink the concepts. We will have to go to systematic approaches, extremely reinforce public transport, invent, let's say, new modes, optimize logistics and go far, far beyond. So this is a challenging process that we are now facing. And the idea is that all cities in Europe are not the same. So there would be a lot of solutions that are transferable, but there will be also a lot of solutions that will have to be tailored to specific environments. And this is really challenging, in particular for small nations as Slovenia, because yes, we have started this path, but we are by far not very well running on this path, and we don't yet have elaborated very good concepts. So this does not mean that we are not good informed, but this means that we now really have to put much more effort in this area, that we will at the end really be able to fulfilling the goals, because now the deadlines where we will really have to deliver good solutions and really provide KPIs are emerging here very soon. And let's say I'm really looking forward to this challenging time, and I hope that we will see a lot of changes in the future.
Of course. Yes, Mr. Turbasic, any thoughts?
So we comes to the public transport company, and I think, in my opinion, sustainable mobility is a process, and then that take time. Mobility and transport are very important for us. When we talk about Europe community and Europe platform for sustainable mobility plans, I think encourage co-finance innovative programs relevant to the activity in solving mobility challenge, and propose legislative initiatives. Adopt guidelines for the development and the implementation of sustainability mobility plans are powerful tools for support sustainable mobility in cities. Incentives, innovative programs, and accompanying registers such as pilots program and knowledge transfer, promotion low emission and zero emission mobility, effort for the greater accessible for the disabled, providing financial support for investment and sustainable mobility, digitalization and information of the system, promoting the electrification of the vehicle fleet, platforms and application for mobility as a service, promoting multimodal of transport, in our opinion, influence change in the urban mobility.
Of course. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we will focus on all of that in the next questions. And for the first one, I would kindly invite Mr. Valentincic to also pitch in some of his ideas to what has been already said.
Yeah, I would like to be very short because it has been really a lot thought. You know, I think very important are three thoughts regarding what the Commission did in the last 8 to 10 years. And the one is really to change the thinking, not about the transportation flows, but really to move from, let's say, the transport of people and goods. So really, we are not talking about the cars, about the buses and so on, but we're talking how to move from the point A to point B. So this change of mind. The second is about that all these things should be moved using alternative fuels. And this has a really very strong impact to all the automotive industry. So the electrification, for example, of cars. And the third thing, it's about thinking about the multimodality. So not about the ownership of cars and so on, but about, let's say, public transportation, buses, trains, micromobility, and so on. So the most important thing is about how to use the different kinds of existing mobility services and how to invent new and reinvent the old, to do the couple that will be the most convenient for users instead of using their own cars. So we're talking about really a change of minds, a different approach to this. And if we are taking into consideration now all these three trends of the electrification on one hand, on the other hand, let's say less cars on the streets because the transportation means will be used just when you need it. It's really a very big impact on automotive industry, about the congestions in cities, about using the public spaces and so on. That has really very huge impact. And on the other hand, also, if you're combining these different trends, they are not 1 + 1, 1 + 1 making the effect, but they are multiplied. So the effect will be very strong and will come also more quickly.
Yeah, thank you for your thoughts. Yeah, I think we have received a lot of food for thought right at the beginning, and we will explore what has been said more in detail in the following questions. But for now, yes, Professor Katraschnik, new urban mobility framework, which I have mentioned before, which is part of the wider efficient and green mobility package, aims to make urban mobility more sustainable, smart, and healthy. In your opinion, what are the main ideas behind it? Which challenges does it propose to tackle? And maybe do you see any practical implications for Slovenian urban mobility in general? Because as you have mentioned, there is no one-size-fits-all approach to it. So maybe do you see, if any, practical implications of the European legislation for Slovenian urban mobility?
Yeah, thank you for this question. What I think is important, that really they have put now, as I see it, let's say, they have put mankind in forefront. So therefore, as I said, it's sustainable, it's smart, and it's healthy. So it's idea that we preserve kind of quality of life, that we preserve healthy environment, but that we also preserve the ecosystem and resources. So certainly this is a vision. So as long as we will move around, we will for sure always have some footprint. But there is a huge impact, how big this impact or footprint is. And yes, there behind this is certainly a systematic approach. And a lot was already said, so I will not repeat it. But the idea is really, what are the demands? What are the best means? How much we can optimize through all the means that we have? And then certainly, which technologies do we use for this? And I think the big thing that Europe is now really pushing forward with this now coherent instruments or coherent legislation, it is that we are not addressing these things one by one, because they should be addressed simultaneously, because some of them are directly much more costly than the others. But if you consider them in a package, and if you consider all direct and indirect costs, then these solutions become viable. And I think this is really a big importance, and also a lot of effort was needed that, let's say, we as citizens, we as researchers, or also policymakers are grasping this and are understanding this and try now to really implement this. So technology-wise, I think main building blocks are there, and we do not envisage now significantly different building blocks, but how we build them in the solutions, this is certainly something that is evolving. Now in Slovenia, if we look, let's say, to good practices, we have few electrified bus lines in cities. So we have tested few of the hydrogen buses. So as said previously, we have shared e-mobility with personal vehicles, which I think is very promising. And I think these are very good seeds. But now, let's say, what I think it's on us, not on EU legislation. EU legislation has set out the framework. So they have set up to us basic KPIs, and we have basically the technology building blocks. And now I think it's on us really to tailor solutions that are suitable for our cities. And this will impose certainly a lot of challenges. Let's say, just imagine that all the buses run on electricity. So just for example, last year in Europe, half of the city buses were electric. So in our bigger cities, we will have already there a let's say, a challenge in supplying enough electric energy. And so, this is then just a simple example, so that there will be multifaceted or multi-level challenges that we'll have to address. And if we will start addressing them one by one as they occur, we will be extremely too late. So let's say, and this is also what our ministries are aware of, we should, as soon as possible, come up with holistic master plans that really fit in the European framework and that really fit in our environment. And I think it's extremely important that we really now start to be realistic and that we follow smart objectives with all the letters being fulfilled.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Terbušić, your company, Marprom, is a public enterprise for urban passenger transport. From your point of view, how effective are European legislation with their policy documents in practice? And does your company try to align its services and vision according to their guidelines? So just, give us some practical examples. How do you see that your company follows the EU legislation?
So our 100 owner is the municipality of the Maribor. Our vision follows the vision of the city of Maribor. In practice, we strive to raise the quality of the service to higher level and become to higher quality and reliability provider of urban passenger transport in Maribor. The development direction of Maribor are the continuous improvement of the service, enabling sustainable mobility, care for the environment, developing a partnership relationship with users, and care to the working condition of employees. With the framework of the availability funds, we follow the guidelines for the development and implementation of the Sustainable Mobility Plan. Measures that reduce the current dependence of fossil fuels, electrification of the fleet. We now buy the 4 full electrical vehicles, and we have one green line in the Maribor, in the center of the Maribor. So full electrical vehicles provide the passenger transport in the Maribor for these first electrical lines. Digitalization and information of the system, the passenger system. We have RTPI system. We have a mobile tickets forecasting system from the passengers, information in timetables. The development of the on-call transport system. We have 2 mini vehicles in the center of town, and we provide free on-call transportation in the city center. Now in the last year, we integrated the ticketing system in the national level, and we now have a single tickets for urban, regional, and railway passenger transport.
Okay, so you have a lot of different good practice examples which align with the European legislation. That is good to hear. So moving on to the challenges. Professor Sarteu-Stashek, one of the biggest challenges of urban mobility is dense traffic that has detrimental effects to the environment. What could be possible solutions in mitigating them? Are there already some best practice examples that we should follow or adopt?
Well, I can tell you that the answer definitely isn't in building more roads. That's the first answer that you get, but that of course isn't the answer, because practice shows that if you build more roads, that means that driving a car is going to be easier at first. Then you bring a lot of cars into the city, you don't have anywhere to park them. The roads become more congested again. So it's basically just this cycle of having to build more roads than having more congestion. And so I think that, like it was said even before, a lot of different ideas and concepts have to come together here to make moving into the city without a car a viable option. So public transport, of course, is one of those options, but then you have options like car sharing or maybe active mobility, micro mobility that have emerged now. So all of those things together that sort of show us as users potential to not just automatically go to driving a car, but to maybe think about using some other modalities to get into the city. There's a concept that I actually really love that's been evolving throughout, especially throughout the European Union, which is called the 15-minute city concept. It's an idea where everything a person needs has to be or should be no further than a 15-minute walk or a bike ride away. Mm-hmm. Of course, it's a great concept. The challenges of implementing it in the Slovenian context are definitely here because you have a lot of dispersed population. But in the scope of urban areas or urban settlements, I think that this is really a good concept. But another thing that I think that we seem to be forgetting in today's technology-driven era is that there are a lot of fairly simple and tried and tested solutions that we can implement to reduce traffic. So for example, things like park and ride, which in the Slovenian context is actually still a very good solution. So you have people from the outskirts or from rural areas driving to the outskirts of a city, and then you have the 15-minute city concept where people can walk or rent a bike, use any other mobility options to get around the city center. Of course, this doesn't really solve congestion issues in rural areas or on highways, but you do get some of the good points of reducing car usage in the city centers. But overall, I think that the thing that is needed most is a shift in our thinking, as especially I think, or this is really evident in Slovenia, because if you think about, okay, I need to go to the shop, my mind basically goes to, okay, where I need to get into my car and go to the shop, right? Yes. So one of the solutions that has proven really effective in the European Union and in Slovenia as well is just to try and give space back to pedestrians and cyclists. So maybe to convert a part of a road or an area in the urban city or in the urban area for better use of urban or active mobility modalities. Maybe just, I don't know, making people walk 200 meters to the city center, parking away, is maybe not doing that much in terms of sustainable mobility as a whole, but it's showing people that they can walk, they can bike, that shift in our thinking is possible. Of course, there's the issue of ensuring equity and equality with mobility, because we still have to take into account that not everybody has the physical option of riding a bike or walking, but for basically the general population, just getting the notion that they can do something with walking or cycling, or they can rent a car and use that car, or anything like that, I think is one of the major issues that we're going to have to face in Slovenia, for example, in the following years.
Of course. Maybe do you know of some of the examples you've mentioned, those of like cities that are sustainable already in terms of urban mobility? Maybe some good practice examples, or I know that Amsterdam perhaps, yes, is quite Yes.
Okay, but I think that the Netherlands as a whole is very cyclist oriented. So it's really hard to compare ourselves to them because they have just a really decades long tradition of cycling that stems just from their history. Yeah, of course, I think that even in Slovenia, you have cities, or maybe not even cities, but like urban areas like Ljutomer, which is one of the front runners in terms of sustainable mobility. They really have become like a living lab for testing things out. They're really experimenting with giving roads back to pedestrians, making roads, I don't know, just maybe colorful, bringing back green areas, which just sort of promotes that active and sustainable moving around to get the residents just away from thinking that cars are the only thing. So in the Slovenian context, I think that Ljutomer is really one of the front runners here. But of course, then we have Ljubljana with closing of a large portion of the city center and stuff like that. But again, I think that for the Slovenian context, we really should focus more on smaller settlements, because managing traffic or implementing sustainable solutions is fairly easier in large cities.
Of course. Okay, thank you. Yes, so a lot has been mentioned about public transport and car sharing. Mr. Valentincic, your company Avantcard specializes in short-term rentals, long-term business rentals, fleet management, and vehicle rentals with drivers. In your opinion, how does your company contribute to finding new solutions for new generation sustainable mobility? So what are the key principles that you strive to follow? And are there any innovative technologies that you use?
Thank you for the question. So Avantcard is a 17 years old company. So it's not a startup, let's say, but thinking what we are doing startup things here. So at the moment we have a fleet of cars of around 3,500 cars in Slovenia, Croatia, and North Macedonia, and around 800, 900 electric cars. So we started with this idea of electric cars 10 years ago with the first Teslas that we brought from America to Europe. And yeah, we are really believing from the beginning, let's say almost for 10 years, let's say, in this new approach to mobility. So we believed already many years ago that our business is not to rent the car, but it's to give the service. So how to move from point A to point B. And our business is about managing the assets. So how to do the best utilization of the assets. And of course, to use the assets in the way that we do not harm the planet, but that we help using more efficiently all the resources. So the resources that are needed to build the car, so how to make that we need less cars, how we can produce so that we will need less cars. Then also about the parking spaces, let's say, why we have to use parking spaces or good land in the city centers for the assets that are used just, I don't know, 10% of the time in the day. So all the time more or less are parked. So, and when we start thinking about this, and also looking many years ago what are doing other company like us in big cities, it was very clear the path. So how to move to electric, digitalized, and shared mobility. So we started to think how to implement this in our region, where we do not have big cities. We have just small cities, you know. So and we found out really that all the other, let's say, companies that also big with cities with Car2Go, Share Now, and so on that started. Let's say their services also in small cities, they couldn't done it profitably, and all they stopped these services. So there was a problem, you know. Big cities has this multimodality approach, alternative mobility services, small cities not. So we started to design how to do this effectively and economically, also in the cities with less than 1 million inhabitants. We started the project I want to go 6 years ago. This was, let's say, innovation project. There were really very few people that believed that it can fly in the city like Ljubljana. So we managed to do this. I can say now that the system is running very great here in Slovenia with more than 400 electric cars in car sharing system. What was the success? The success was because we really understand, let's say, how the service is operating, how the people are using the cars, what are their needs, and so on. We started to design the service from bottom up. We invested a lot of money to develop the specialized tools. We developed the technical solutions, so software, and of course also the business model. We expanded the operation also in Croatia, in Zagreb, and the other cities, and we are now fit, let's say, to replicate this model also in all the other cities in Europe that are small and medium-sized. So we are helping cities how not to get behind, even if they are small, so that people can get rid of the ownership of the car and use all the advantages that the alternative mobility solutions can give. So on the other hand, we are helping the cities also in their public transportation system, because, you know, why people are not using more existing public transportation solution, because they cannot fit all their needs, and because of that they need also their own car, and if they have their own car, they use less public transportation, also micromobility. So with this additional service of car sharing, we are giving to citizens that thing that was until now missing in the small cities. So really people, we see now here, let's say in Ljubljana, Maribor, people are really starting families to get rid of their second car, many also the first car. So I can say in Ljubljana, 1/10 of citizens is already using, let's say, our solution. And by using our solution, it's using also more walking, more bicycles, more public transportation. So this is our mission, how to make it fly, all these new services.
Perfect. So you mentioned Ljubljana as some of the good practice examples that we have here in Slovenia. What about other countries? What are some of the latest trends? How are they mainstreaming electric cars in their everyday lives? Do you maybe have some information or data from other countries? Do you have some good examples that you try to follow? Some, you know, like a shining new example?
But frankly speaking, really, we are looking a lot, you know, but you know, examples that such services are successfully operating in the small cities, so we're talking about the cities with less than 1 million inhabitants, are practically not existing now, even not with 100% electric cars. So I can say that, let's say, Ljubljana, Maribor, and these are maybe lighthouse for Europe, at least for Europe, how you can fly also these kinds of services that, of course, they are particularly designed that can fit these things, also the operations and everything. It's very customized for medium and small cities. So from this point of view, we do not have any good example. But of course, we have, let's say, our passion is how to help the region and also the other cities that are less than 1 million inhabitants that will not get behind with all the solutions that have big cities. So we're talking about 1 million inhabitants up. What we're looking now at this moment is that many cities, so here in Europe, are looking how to implement these kind of solutions. So they are all looking, they see the need for their citizens for this, and they're trying to let's say get mobility solutions providers also in their cities. On the other hand, it is what we are also appreciating, of course, also looking is how developing the solutions in big cities. And this mind shift, from the ownership to using the service like shared and so on, micromobility and so on, it's really the mind of new generation. And this for sure is the future. So here are big cities the lights, because all this innovation comes first in the big cities. But then the implementation is totally different also in the small cities.
Thank you. Professor Cvehtaev-Stršek, Professor Katrašnik, we were discussing electric cars a lot. Do you see maybe any possible pitfalls in using them? Because we know electric cars will prevail in the future. However, is there any research done in this respect? Are there any negative effects of using electric cars maybe? And how effective are they actually in combating traffic pollution in general?
Well,
Professor,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think that, basically all research shows that at the point of consumption or where they're being used, electric cars, of course, most certainly reduce traffic pollution, because they don't produce any direct emissions apart from, I don't know, dust from braking or the tire use. Their noise levels are significantly reduced. So they are really good in reducing emissions from personal mobility at the point where the cars are being used. Of course, there are a plethora of issues that they don't solve, and I think that we probably all know about them. So you still have cars, even though they're electric cars, they are still cars. So they still cause congestion. They have to be parked somewhere. There's the additional issue of having to charge them. So you need to make sure that there's enough electricity, that there's the infrastructure for charging. So I think that they're definitely not an ideal solution. So I wouldn't say that if we just magically all changed our cars to electric cars, that would solve everything. I think that it would solve a small portion, but it would cause a lot of problems on the other hand. So, and again, they have basically very high carbon footprint in their whole life cycle. So especially if we produce energy that they run on with, I don't know, with very polluting not hydro plants, but coal plants and stuff like that. I see the potential for electric vehicles or even hydrogen vehicles in the future, basically with electrifying the existing fleets for public transport or for services like car sharing with electric vehicles, where their usage is really high. So it's not like we're just changing our car to the electrical car, but where you have really good percentage of usage of their of the car of the electrical vehicle. So then you can justify just the whole life cycle better. So that's where I see the opportunity with electrifying fleets of public transport, car sharing, and just solutions like that.
Mm-hmm. Professor Katrašnik?
Yeah, so certainly urban mobility, future of urban mobility is electric. I think there is no doubt about it. So, but maybe if we step one step ahead. So for moving people and goods, we need some power. I mean, generally, we can get power from internal combustion engines. We can get it from electric motors, and electric motors can get electricity either from a battery and or from a fuel cell. So if we now it's important what we are solving. If we just try to solve greenhouse gas emissions, then all solutions can be positive. So we can have e-fuels, we can have biofuels also for internal combustion engines. But why internal combustion engines is not that preferred? Because in producing e-fuels, we have lower efficiency. So we need more primary energy, so more green electricity, if let's say this is the source. And then they also emit toxic emissions, and they have, yes, as said, also higher noise level. Please be aware, if we run on tires, tire wear produces much more particles than modern engines. So this is not to be neglected, but certainly there are other emissions as NOx emissions, CO2, HC. So in that context. And then what is also important is that, yes, electricity is very important, but as was already said, producing electric vehicles currently has quite high still also carbon footprint because of a lot of energy for mining and producing. This might change in the future with reducing or let's say having greener sources for production, but still we use a lot of materials. So we have to rethink, will we in cities drive around with big batteries, or will we be connected to some stationary grids? And so I think this is important fact that it's not just a bus or it's a car, but we have had already in the past solutions that require much less materials and which are in LCA, so life cycle, more sustainable. There comes certain solutions. There are already produced some electric buses which do not have a huge battery, but have, let's say, fuel cell range extender. Also, there might be viable. But so it's really now important how cities are developing and what will be viable business cases. And why this is also important is because, let's say, if we have an electric car, and we charge it slow charge at home, this poses some difficulty on electric grid if we have a lot of such cars. But if we will go to fast charging, which we will also use, we have to be aware that for passenger cars, maximum powers for fast charging are now 350 kilowatts. So this means for an entire neighborhood, a smaller one or a block. And for trucks, we are at 2 megawatt or even more. And so this will for sure pose quite some challenges. These are not unsurmountable challenges, but this means quite a lot of investments in the infrastructure. And now we come to so-called sector coupling idea, so that we will have to wisely couple different sectors, that we will have to wisely select which energy vectors. So it says electricity, is it hydrogen? Are there some other fuels? And how we will handle this. And this again relates to entire ecosystem of a state. So what are our energy sources? When do we use them? And all this. But let's say why this sector coupling is so important is because, let's say, we will in Slovenia for sure have a lot of solar power. And if we run a lot of electric fleet during the days, and if we charge close to the source of a solar panel, then we might be compensating these big local sources with big local sinks, and the system might be optimized. But again, the entire system will need to be optimized. But these are now just technological solutions, and I think at the end, what is really important is what we as citizens or we as customers will accept, and this relates to comfort. And yes, all this solution, shared mobility, not owning a car, certainly there are in the entire sustainable mobility, very promising solutions. But I would say that this is quite some regional dependency, how these solutions will really be accepted by people. And I think this is really important at the end, and we should really not neglect this factor.
Thank you. So now we are slowly reaching the end of our discussion. I would just like quickly to pose a question to each and every one of you. And I would just kindly ask for a brief and short answer. In your opinion, what will urban mobility look like 10 years from now? What are your predictions for the future? How smart will future mobility be, in your opinion? Professor Cvechte Oysterschek, a short reply from your side.
Okay. Well, my opinion may be a little controversial, but I actually dislike the term smart, or at least what it has evolved into, because we're seeing the usage of the term just pointing to technology use just for the goal of technology use. But yeah, I think that the usage of technology should have a goal, an objective. not just implementing technology just so that we can think that we're smart. And this is something that we've seen a lot in cities. Just, okay, so there's this technology, we can implement it and we're going to be smart. But yeah, so there are many great technologies that I think will definitely be at the forefront in the future, or maybe in the next 5-10 years, if you know what to do with them. So things like smart sensors, big data, location analysis, good predictions with artificial intelligence. Those are all things that are sort of buzzwords right now, but if used correctly and if used with a really good specific goal in mind, I think that that really can bring urban mobility to the point where it's really good for the city and for the users in the end, because I think that the shift from planning for the sake of planning or using technology for the sake of using technology really has to be sort of towards planning for the user. So thinking about what the user should get from, for example, from urban mobility. And I think that this is something that really is going on right now. And even like we said in the beginning, this is one of the focuses of the new European legislation, European policies. So bringing a user-centric view on mobility. So I think that the urban mobility of the future will be more tailored to our needs. And on the other hand, I think that we as consumers are beginning to get that idea that besides just being comfortable, having the cheapest mobility option and things like that, that we're trying to incorporate the sustainability aspect into our mobility and into our journey planning. So I think that overall, mobility and especially urban mobility in 10 years will definitely be more technology supported and will be more user-centric. We'll have a lot of options and we'll think about what those options mean even for the environment.
Okay, Mr. Tervusic? Yeah, what are your predictions for the future?
So technique and technology are moving forward. People are becoming more aware. I see urban mobility as multimodal and public passenger transport as the carrier of the mobility in the city. Okay. I see an increasing role of digitalization and computerization and the use of the modern platforms.
Thank you. Mr. Valentincic, any follow-up?
I would say that will be much less car ownership in urban mobility. Electrified will be the mobility, shared, multimodal, and much user-friendly. And we will leave the public spaces not used cars, but the public spaces will be used by people, by green spaces. I think the cities will look much better, and people will enjoy and live healthier than now.
Thank you. Professor Katrašnik, last remarks.
Yeah, I fully agree with the previous speakers. So, but I think what will be important is, or not that glad the information is, I think we will see huge diversity between front runners and the ones that are lagging behind. I think in some cities, as for example Singapore, this what was now mentioned is already happening. So they're building entire neighborhoods without any parking places. So really, public spaces are for people. You have multimodal transport below the ground. You have it on the surface. You have smart mobility. You already have this. And I think we will see much more such cities in the future. So where, compared to what we are using in Slovenia, they will look totally different at first glance. But I think in those cities that will be lagging behind, there will be nothing much more different. There will be somewhere some digital sign, and there will be some electrified vehicles running around. I'm on purpose saying this with kind of bold words, because I hope that we will not be in this later group.
Yeah, I think we all agree that we think the same. So yeah, now we have reached the end of our panel. I would like to thank our participants for a very vibrant debate, and you have certainly given us a lot of food for thought. And yes, should any from our audience have any question, feel free to post them in the chat and we will answer them subsequently. If not, then yeah, this is it. Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Well, nice.